Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. Today's guest is fiction writer Brad Watson, whose newest novel, Miss Jane, has received a warm critical reception and, like his previous novel, The Heaven of Mercury, has been a hot contender for the National Book Award. Miss Jane is the story of one Mississippi woman with an unusual and difficult affliction. I spoke with Brad Watson in the annual Alabama Writers Symposium in the Old Courthouse Museum in Monroeville, Alabama. Brad, it's good to see you again.
Don.
It's been a little while, and this is a special occasion. We're in Monroeville, and you are this year's winner of the Harper Lee Award.
Yeah, I'm very honored. Yeah.
I'm supposed to ask you, like a good journalist would, what are your feelings upon knowing that you are going to join the winners of the Harper Lee Award?
I plan for my next book sales to mirror those of To Kill a Mockingbird.
Perfect.
No, it's an honor. I mean, a lot of great writers have gotten this award. I appreciate it, and I especially like that the previous winner was E.O. Wilson, who I met once at Alabama when he came to get an award, an alumni award, and they asked him what he wanted to do while he was there, in addition to getting his award, and he said, "I want to visit the creative writing people." We were astonished. But he came over and talked to us and said how much he had, this was before he had written his novel, and talked to us about how much he admired what we do. And of course we should really, but he made a big impression. And while I was working on Miss Jane, the doctor character was not really working out for me, and I said I'd make a change. And I thought about E.O. Wilson, and he kind of became a bit of a model for me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, he is not only the Darwin of our time, a genius.
Yeah.
He's also a very kind and generous man.
As we picked up on, when we met him, that worked. That was working. My impression of him, was what I was working with, because I obviously don't really know him.
Well, actually, he's a frequent guest on this show, a four-time guest, and it is amazing how open and how candid, how easily he talks, and how much he wants to get that save the earth ecological message across. He is really a kind of a secular saint.
I think so. I admire him a lot.
You are a Mississippi boy. Most of your fiction, Heaven of Mercury and now Miss Jane, set in Mississippi, but you are presently living, as far as I could tell, on a barren hilltop in Wyoming.
A barren plain populated by red buttes.
One of the things that happens with writers, it's fairly common. I mean, there's no reason why you should stay in Meridian all your life in order to write about Mississippi. But what are the advantages or disadvantages of being in such a really, really different culture? Or is it really different?
It is really different. The longer I stay there, the more I realize that. I think getting away is good. It really helped me to write Heaven of Mercury by being in Boston, and I think I got a perspective on my hometown and my past that I might not have had I stayed there amongst everyone I'd always known and the place I'd always known. It kind of helped me to fictionalize it, to make it something of the imagination as much as it was reality for me. I was there 5 years, and I was younger. I've been in Wyoming 12 years now, and I found it's more difficult. I had to come home more often. When I was working on this book, I'd go to the place where my mom grew up, which was close to where my great aunt grew up, who was sort of the inspiration for this book, right across the road in the woods. And it's all changed now, but my mom, while she was alive, told me a lot about what it was like when it was a farm and not just a bunch of pine trees. So it helped me to go there and just kind of soak it up. And also I'd come home just to hear people talk and, to feel the air and just get a sense of the southernness. And because out there, I mean, at first I was buried in my work and I didn't really I thought, well, this is kind of like the South without trees, you know, and then prairies and stuff. But it's very different culture. So.
It is. At first, writers seem to gain objectivity and perspective, but then they need the smells and the sounds and and the sound of language and the little bits of local color that is needed for a novel.
Yeah, it's really very important. And Birdsong, you know, I mean, Nell and I, my wife and I both, the other night were saying, oh, we miss all the birds. She's from the Northeast and I'm from the South, and you know, there's so many birds. There's so many songbirds as well as other birds and raptors and things. But we have the raptors and a few prairie birds. and of course, you know, buzzards. Everybody has those. And a lot of crows and ravens. But you don't have all that bird song. And that's always, it actually has shown up a lot in my writing. So I miss it.
This novel is, in a sense, a kind of fictionalized, highly fictionalized biography. Let's not call it a biography. Let's say it's a story of a woman's life, really from the moment of her birth till the end. And that woman was afflicted. That woman had an unusual physical ailment, and that woman is based on your great aunt.
Great aunt.
Great aunt.
Yeah.
Tell me about your great aunt, and did she had that problem? Yes. Can you describe it?
Yeah. Well, she had a birth defect.
Right.
But actually no one alive when I started working on this book knew what it was. Oh. I don't know who in her life knew what it was. Her doctor, maybe her parents, maybe a sibling, of which the real great aunt had several. She had several siblings. But they didn't talk about it. I mean, the people later in the next generation, my mother's, didn't talk about what it was. No one really knew what it was. On her deathbed, she told my aunt that when she said, "What is my aunt?" My aunt said, "What is wrong with you?" She was a forthright person. And my great aunt would only say, "I only have one." And I said, "One what?" And my aunt said, "I guess she just meant one, you know, opening for waste and such." And so that was a clue. There were no journals, there were no letters, there were no medical records. The nursing home where the actual great aunt had died was gone. And so I didn't know what was wrong with her. I did know that she was incontinent. Everyone knew that and talked about it very respectfully. And knew that she lived a fairly long life, that she was very thin, and that she seemed to have very few serious medical complications in her life. So I started trying to figure out what it might have been, what her condition might have been. And all these more common, I read old medical texts about urological conditions, as well as looked, you know, on the internet, and nothing was matching up. Everything I found that was more common involved a whole lot of complications and a lot of infections and trips to the doctor and so on and so on. And my great aunt apparently did not suffer a lot of that. She would travel and go places. I didn't know how she managed that, except that she had reportedly a very strong character and confidence, and didn't seem to mind, in the eyes of others, her life alone. But my wife and I were talking and began to question whether that could have been really true or whether it was just the family's tendency toward being stoic. You know, and they were country people, and they didn't talk about things. They were very sort of stoic people who dealt with poverty and other kinds of things, and with a sort of toughness, you know. And then one day I was going through some pictures with my mother, and I was in my late 20s maybe, and I saw a snapshot of this attractive young woman. Maybe she was a teenager, an older teenager or a younger woman, and she had on a sun hat, and she was looking back at the camera in this kind of coquettish fashion. And I said, "Who's that?" My mother said, "Well, that's Aunt Jane." And I said, "It looks like she's flirting." And my mother said, "Then, yeah, she was really popular with the boys. She used to go to the dances up in the country when they would do them." And I said, "How did she do that, you know, with their problems?" And my mom said, "I don't know." So that was kind of that I thought about that a long time, before I began
Yeah.
trying to work on this book. And when I did start working on the book, I thought, that's a clue. Maybe her physical stature is a clue. The fact that she liked to travel. Did she ever really have a beau or consider having a beau? And all of that. And it helped me to put together a story of someone who seemed not to have much of a life.
But she did.
But she did. I figured that she did in one way or another.
I think people, critics, readers, it's a quiet book.
Yeah.
But I think that's not a good word for the book.
It's
There
a
are
deadly word for a book.
I think, yes, it doesn't help sales.
Yeah.
Quiet. People should like quiet, but they don't as much as they should.
Yeah.
They want fast and furious.
Yeah.
But that book, there are moments, I think, in that book of heroism. And I'm thinking particularly of when Miss Jane, I think she falls in love. A neighbor boy falls in love with her. He understands that they could probably never have children. He may even understand that their intimate life might not be regular, but he wants to marry her.
It's a bit of a mystery, I think, for me. For him, I let it be for me, and I let it be for him, just how much he might understand. But he knows he has strong feelings for her, and he's willing to give it a shot.
Yes.
But the doctor is skeptical, and then Jane becomes convinced that it's not going to work, and it's not fair for him. And then later, though, they both question whether that was the right thing to do.
But the heroism is in giving up her chance for happiness because it would endanger his happiness. She knew he wanted to marry conventionally and have children.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she's a real heroic character.
She's also, I think, a smart character because she realizes that if he did become unhappy in that relationship, it would become unhappy for her as well.
Right.
Because she's a realist.
She is out on a farm. It's mostly rural. And one of the things about farms, as farm boys will tell you, is that the world of farm animals and the world of nature, the actual birds and bees, are a constant sexual maelstrom.
Right.
A constant.
Yeah.
It's in her eye always that the world reproduces madly.
Yeah. She sees it, I think, as any child does. And then as she begins to realize, that this is not a life that she can participate in any sort of traditional or regular, what we consider a conventional way, then she becomes, I think, more fascinated. And then, of course, there's that scene where her sister exposes her to the world of human sexuality in a way that's not so great, so nice. And then she becomes a bit of a voyeur herself out of curiosity and then feels badly about it. But she has her way of trying to educate herself and to satisfy her curiosity.
Yeah.
It's
all around
a little
her.
double-edged.
Yeah, it's all around her. The humans around her, the animals around her, and literally the world. You do not write Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. You're not that kind of nature writer, but you are, whether you are willing for the public to know it or not, you are a highly observant nature writer. This book, Miss Jane, is filled with descriptions of literally butterflies, clover, flowers, birds. It's not an accident. This is something that's important to you.
Yeah, I don't think it's, some people will say that the nature writers, have a reverential attitude toward nature, and mine is more fascination,
Oh.
of the complexity of it, the odd beauty of it. We'll take for granted the beauty of something like, say, a butterfly, but that's a very odd creature.
Yes.
And I also had the thought as I was working that, and I think it's expressed somewhere in the book, that it begins to dawn on her whether she can articulate it or not, that this is such a varied and odd, weird sort of world, if you look at it closely enough, that it's a place where she can feel like, well, I'm just another odd, normal thing within the whole
Another creature.
Spectrum of it. I'm another creature.
Yeah.
And I don't have to feel like a freak, because if you look closely enough, They're, just take the insect world, for instance. There are a lot of very freaky things, in that.
A lot of odd mating,
but they're beautiful.
And killing.
Yeah. But it's all beautiful, and
Yeah.
as Dr. Wilson would tell you. So I like that she sort of begins to absorb that notion. Yeah.
Again, I think there are moments when she dehydrates herself and she starves herself and she goes to the dance. There are moments when she gives up what could have been a marriage and a love that might have lasted a long time. Those are heroic. The other hero in this novel, I think, is the doctor. That doctor, an MD, GP. I'm not a great reader of romances, but I was hoping, as many of your readers were hoping, he loves her, I think. And I think they would have made a couple. And I'm rooting for him. Yeah. He's much older, of course, but that doesn't bother me any. Yeah. But I was thinking they would make a couple, and you went along. I know that had to be an alternative in your head, but it's not the one you chose.
It's funny. You work on these things. You work on them a long time sometimes, and this one went through a lot of drafts. You veer off the wrong path and you have to come back. But one of the things I wondered a lot about was what exactly is this, and how do I treat it, and what does it become? What seems natural to the book? What's natural to the characters, to the world that you're making there. And although it does veer close, and I think the inclinations are there, both, I think, just fall back on common sense and decide, we have a good thing right now in terms of our relationship, which is a kind of avuncular, kind of paternal.
But it's a real friendship.
But avuncular, but a real friendship also,
Well, he delivers her. Mm-hmm. He is there at the moment for birth.
First to see her.
And
as what she is.
And stays with her case for decades.
Yeah.
Looking into research, writing letters, trying to find out if there are new treatments or procedures.
Yeah. Keeping up a constant correspondence with his specialist friend in Johns Hopkins, which is the great school for urological research, in the States. I guess it still is. It used to be.
I have no idea.
Since the 19th century. Yeah. In fact, and one of the books I read was by this Dr. Hugh Young, who's mentioned in the book, who was a real person, who did a lot of groundbreaking research in surgery and surgical repair on various urological conditions. And his book had nothing on this, in 1940, had nothing on this condition that I settled on as being the one that I thought made sense for the character, but also very possibly was my great aunt's condition.
I've lost track. What is the birth date of Miss Jane?
Her birth date is November 1915.
The character, Miss Jane.
The character. My great aunt. My
yeah.
great aunt was actually born in 1888.
Yeah, much less chance of any medical salvation there.
Much less chance, but even, in the book, there's no chance for it until Jane is well into her 60s.
Right. Well.
So she decides not to bother.
No, I could see it.
Yeah.
There are a couple of you and I have talked about this book as it went through various forms, and one of the things that was true of it from the start, that it's beautifully written. Sorry, and it's quiet. Right. Sorry, but you injected a couple of subplots, shall we call them? One of the subplots is the insurance policy and the tractor accident, and the other subplot, as I perceived it as a reader, was Jane's sister, who goes into town and flirts with prostitution. I think. Were they added? Did you put those in there? Were they there from the start?
No. They were layered in subsequent drafts. You begin to sense where there are gaps in the narrative, where there are holes, where where you could use something a little bit different, where you need to inject some different kind of excitement, whether it be dangerous or whether it be shameful or whatever, into the character's life.
Right.
And you find a way to do that with the characters you have on hand. Sometimes those characters might be very peripheral at one point, and you decide you want to pull them back, pull them more into the main story.
Jane's father.
Jane's father was always there, and it was always ready to step up, I think, and I knew he needed to. The tenants, no, not in the same way. There was an old story of insurance fraud that in Scuba, Mississippi, that was written about in a book called Bloody Kemper by a native of Meridian. True story, and then about how the people were colluding to kill people after buying insurance policies on them.
In tractor accidents?
No, by poison in that case.
Oh.
The doctor would administer the poison, yeah. And when the father in this book decides to buy these insurance policies at the urging of his brother-in-law, just as a way of protecting his crop. So if these people die halfway through a crop,
that makes sense.
This will help you to pay for your losses if you can't bring it in.
Right.
And then one thing that the father worries about, he says, if something happens, it's going to look like I set it up, because that's what happened up there in Scuba. And he says, well, I don't think you're the kind of person they're going to suspect of that sort of thing, and it would have to be pretty obvious, So that was poisoning,
Yeah.
If somebody falls off a tractor, it's kind of hard to blame you. But it brings the world to Jane, the character, and to the whole family, I think, in a different way. The outside world brings it into them, and I think brings tragedy into their lives in a way that a sense of tragedy is already there. I think in that family, with the loss of the early child, and then with dealing with Jane's condition and not being and having to keep up, their spirits up over that. But this kind of, I think, is something that breaks that down in a way, begins to break down.
Yeah. Well, Jane has a stoicism, and she likes the world of nature, and she likes living out on a farm. But her sister doesn't.
No.
Not in the same way. Grace wants to be a town girl.
Yeah.
Was there a brothel in Meridian?
There were a lot of them.
Were there?
Yeah, there were a lot of them down there in the lower part of Meridian, down near Front Street and that area. Off to the east, I think, is where most of them were. I think they were very common. They were there for men would go there not only for the women, but also to gamble and drink and things like that. And they stayed around until the people running the military base during World War II decided to close them down because the men were, I guess, going there too often.
The soldiers.
The soldiers. Yeah, the soldiers were.
Well, she has. I don't think that Sister Grace ever becomes a prostitute.
No, although she has an active sexual life.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
But it's amateur.
Right.
Amateur-ish.
It's amateur, yeah.
Yeah, not professional.
Yeah.
But she does. I got this sense that she was looking at it and thinking, well, maybe that's one way to go.
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
But she's smart. She's too smart. She knows that she can make her money without having to do that and do better and have a more dignified position in the profession.
And she does.
So she does. She's a business manager.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's smarter.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're at a place here where I ask the guest,
Did you want to know
what are you going to do next? And it's not going to take 6 years either.
No.
So what are you going to do next? You have some options.
I have some options.
We only have 2 minutes.
I've talked to my agent and others about what I could do. I have a sort of coming of age novel set in my hometown in the 60s and 70s that I'm working on. You've seen a piece of it. I would like your opinion. I was a reporter in the Gulf Coast in the 1980s when all the change was going on in Gulf Shores area and along the Florida coast, and I would like to write a novel set during that time about those things, and so I've done some work on that. And I have several short stories in the works that I hope will lead to another collection, and so that I could do another sort of 2-book deal
And before you do write even another book, I'd like to see in the New Yorker the essay about Brad Watson, who went to Hollywood at the age of 17 to become a movie star.
And ended up being
That's a story that the world needs to see.
I tried to write it as a book a few times and it hasn't worked. But yeah, I think maybe I am going to try it. I'm going to write an essay about that. I went out there to be a movie star. There was a writer's strike. I had various jobs and ended up being a garbage man. And that was one of the most fun jobs I ever had. So I do want to write that as an essay.
Garbage man to the stars.
Sort of.
Sort of. Well, the New Yorker piece first. One of the two novels, Soon.
Yeah, some short stories also. In the meantime.
Short story collection, Aliens in the Prime of Their Lives, Last Days of the Dogmen.
Yeah.
Those collections did well. The next one will too.
Hope
But
so.
whatever you choose to do next, you can count on me, and we'll talk again.
Thank you.
Thank you.